Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. My name is Dave Haley. Thanks for making time to attend today. We're going to be talking about process and technology alignment, titled Forcing a Square Peg into a Round Hole, which is something we're trying to avoid doing. We don't want to do that. So starting off, I'll just share a little story. About 2009, I fell in love. She was tall, Southern beauty. She was smart. She was modern. I just saw a whole new way of life for myself. Well, I'm talking about a distribution center. I hope everybody picked up on that. I hope I didn't lead anybody astray. What I'm referring to is I was given a task to consolidate 6 distribution centers into one large 850,000 square foot center in a beautiful southern coastal city. The legacy buildings had different degrees of modernization, I'll call it. Well, they like that, huh? That's pretty good. One of them had a Tier 1 WMS. They had a modification to allow overpack operations. We had RF technology. So in its day, it was pretty advanced. We had an overflow building, was just what you do with an overflow building, nothing. And then the other operations in Fort Payne, Alabama were completely manual. But they all worked. There was no magic to the one that had the tools versus the ones that didn't. They fit their business model. In fact, the facilities in Fort Payne had a deal with a major big box retailer, a drop and hook program where they filled up trailers, they put them out in the yard, the retailer picked them up, dropped off some empties, and they just did that like clockwork. It was really a nice, clean operation. And of course, we had to monkey with that. So we went in and moved those operations into an 850,000 square foot center. I believe I said that already. And it was a beautiful building. It had 65-foot ceilings, as I recall, had conveyor that stretched as far as you could see, sortation system. It had specially designed equipment that fit into the top of the building so that the operators were comfortable going up as high as they had to go, and good spot to take a nap, but that was a different problem we ran into. So we were all excited. We thought we had really taken these manual processes, these old-fashioned things, and really made them better. I mean, how could we not, right? Old paper picking, all this stuff, move it into this new building, all this technology, WMS, conveyor systems, everything you think you want, until we plugged it in. And when we plugged it in, we found out that we had extremely overcomplicated what was a very simple solution. For us to get a case to complete an order took forever. We didn't do our groundwork. We didn't understand what we were trying to do. We didn't understand where this technology helped us and where it hindered us. We should have split up the businesses based on that customer profile, but we were just so confident that taking something from a manual, old school model into an advanced, highly technologically supported model could only be better. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How does that happen? We'll look at some examples of companies that made that decision and maybe missed something. And the point isn't to, I'm not going to name any companies, I don't even know the names of most of them, but the point isn't to pick at people, it's just to talk about what can happen, what can get missed, what ends up happening when you miss, and how can you avoid that as you go forward. So I hope you find that interesting. So I look at that picture and, does that work? I guess you could say it kind of worked, right? The square peg is kind of occupying most of the hole. You couldn't say it's optimized, though. You couldn't look at that and say, we did a really good job. There's splinters, there's broken pieces, there's gaps. Looks like they pounded on it with a sledgehammer. And that's just a visual to think about, are we going into improve our operations with technology, and are we forcing a bad solution into an imperfect process or even a non-existent process? So that's what we're going to discuss today. And why should we worry about this? Well, if you walked around the floor today, you might have noticed 1 or 2 robot solutions out there. Might have been 3. I think there might be 3. It's coming, right? So automation is the hot topic. Last I looked at it, there was almost 500,000 open warehouse jobs in the US. 500,000 jobs that are not filled. The projections from what I see are another 500,000 jobs are going to be needed in the next 3 to 5 years because of the growth of e-com and fulfillment in general. So that's 1 million jobs and 1 million times that many people, man hours that we have to fill up. I don't know where the people are coming from. We have an aging population. People aren't going to do this kind of jobs. I think there's 3 million just women who, before the pandemic, left the workforce and haven't come back yet. There's all this gig work you can do. Uber's a big one, DoorDash, all those things where you don't have to go in and work in a distribution center. You can make your money in a more convenient way that fits your lifestyle. You probably haven't noticed, but there's a lot of inflation going on. You might have read about that a little bit. That's not just the consumer that we hear about. That's not the gas prices and the food, but those pressures are in our supply chain, in our costs of doing business. Things are getting much more expensive, and we're going to end up passing most of that onto the consumer. But can you not pass it all? Can you become more efficient? Can you become more competitive by intelligently applying technology and automation into your processes? It's one way you might create a competitive advantage. And here come the robots. As you see out there, the robots are coming. As I read, I think there's, in 2019, there were 4,000 distribution centers that had robots in them. And projected by 2025, there'll be 50,000 warehouses with robotics in there, and that's going to equate to 4 million robots. So there's big change coming. But you just can't turn them loose and have them go willy-nilly. You have to do it in a strategic way that fits your goals, it fits your process, and then you marry that with the technology. Another thing to take note of, like with most technology, when it first comes out, it's really expensive. And nobody wants to be that early adopter, right? I mean, you want to let somebody else screw up, and then you wait till the price comes down and the bugs are worked out. A lot of the robotics vendors are getting very creative with their financing. They do lease arrangements, they're reporting, and I don't sell robots, so I'm just sharing information. They can get an equivalent hourly wage of around $7 an hour with some of their leasing solutions compared to the $15, $18, $20 an hour that we are currently tasked with paying wages to our workers. And those wages are going to go up. I heard there's some group now wants to strike at McDonald's to get $25 an hour to go work at McDonald's. That's going to be an expensive Big Mac. So as I was putting the presentation together and looking for content and trying to figure out how to fill up 35 minutes, I came across this quote that I really liked. It was fitting. It's not exactly about warehousing, but I think the concept is pretty much the same. And I'm just going to read through this. Technology's primary effect is to amplify human forces. Like a lever, technology amplifies people's capacities in the direction of their intentions. You cannot expect technology to transcend existing social forces. It tends instead to amplify whatever tendencies are already in place. For example, social media, which instead of transforming us into a newly informed global community, supercharge our existing biases for gossip, self-aggrandizement, and easy distraction. And that was Dr. Toyama. I think that's a pretty telling quote, right? It's hard to disagree with it. So you have a great tool, and you apply the great tool, and it doesn't necessarily deliver what it should be able to deliver. Social media, other than creating a few TikTok millionaires, it's really been challenging to our culture and our ability to get along and our political structure. It really hasn't done what it's supposed to do. And from a personal standpoint, I think what it does is it ties up people's capacity so they don't have time to use the internet for its best purpose, which is to share dog pictures. I mean, that's really what we need to be using the internet for. That's our daughter's dog, Whiskey. She's visiting us for a couple weeks, and she's just a treat. And why anybody would want to argue politics instead of looking at that cute dog is well beyond me. So I'm not above stealing people's good ideas. So I think it's a great way to go through life. I took Dr. Toyama's statement and shifted a little bit more to the warehouse. And warehouse technology and automation's primary effect is to alleviate human effort. I mean, that's why we do it, right? We're trying to reduce the man hours needed to get the work done. Technology amplifies people's capacity to get quality work done safely and efficiently. You can't expect technology or automation to transcend existing poor or non-existent processes. Instead, it will amplify flawed processes already in place. That's what happens. If your process is not robust enough and you add technology or a computer system, you are going to have a mess. On the outside, you may slow down. For the worst case scenario, you could shut down and you just cannot be able to service your customers. So it's important to do this work, it's important to evaluate it, but it's always important to do the basic work first. Look at your processes, look at your training, get on the floor with the folks, make sure you understand what are they really doing today. Because sometimes that work instruction that you wrote and you're so proud of has morphed into something else over the years, and you don't know it. So now it's time to prove it out. As I said, I'm going to go through 4 or 5 little short stories of companies that have applied technology and had a miss. Once again, to be redundant, I'm not picking at anybody. I picked at myself first. But we've all been through these things, and we all get these pressures to get things done quickly. That may not always be the best solution. So I hope you guys had lunch. I don't want to make anybody hungry. I titled this one, Turning One Mistake into Two. So this is a story about a client that one of our consultants worked with many years ago. And it was a bakery, and obviously in a lot of industries, particularly in food and medicine and things like that, you have date code issues. You have to ship the first to expire out first, FIFO. So they had a legacy ASRS, Automatic Storage Retrieval System, which is a great piece of technology. And not questioning technology, it can help you with your inventory, it can cut down your man hours. It's been around for a few years and it does work. Well, they decided to upgrade their WMS. Another good thing to have. It's good to have a WMS. They somehow missed getting the ARS to take the date code logic from the WMS, and they couldn't operate, they couldn't work together. So when I hear that, I think of a 4-letter word. And I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm going to say it. Test. What did they test that they missed that? I mean, I can't fathom in my mind how something that critical to your operation is missed in your testing protocols. But again, not being there, that just points to a failure in understanding what are we trying to do, what's our main goal here, and our main goal is to ship product within a date time that allows us to get it to our customers as expected. And that was just completely missed. Now, you have to ship, right? So what do? Well, I'll throw bodies at it. So they had people manually sorting out the trays as they came out of the sortation machine and manually arranging them to ship the oldest first. If that happened today, could they find those people to do that? I don't know. They might not. They might actually be stopped. So again, that's an example. So as you're taking these projects on, and I hope you will be, understand what's your goal, what's the process we're doing today to achieve that goal, and how does that automation we're considering fit? You may find out you have to alter your process. Some people are in love with the processes, they're never going to change them. Well, that may work, that may not work, but you need to take the time to do it. So my next story here, it is really relates to KPIs. Big fan of KPIs. We need KPIs, but we need to have holistic KPIs. If you are measuring one or two things and not looking at other things, you're going to end up creating more problems than you're solving. So this story refers to a e-com retailer. The gentleman who shared the tale with me said it was a preppy retailer. I haven't heard the term preppy in a number of years, so it might be an older story. They had a unit sorter, another great tool, no problem with unit sorters, and they had a WMS. Well, their main metric, the one that they drove and drove and drove, was units picked per man hour. Right? They said they had a world-class units picked per man hour. My question when I heard the story is, well, what else were they measuring? Because clearly they weren't measuring everything. The way they set their system up was that they would print a pick ticket, a label that would go on the package, and they would confirm it as being picked when the label was printed. So they didn't go to the location, they didn't scan it out of the location, they didn't scan the package, they didn't keep their inventory integrity up, but man, were they going flying around there, grabbing the inventory, throwing in the unit sorter, grabbing another one. They were moving until something went wrong. Because they didn't know where it was supposed to come from. They didn't really know it was actually picked. They had a small cluster of people that were tasked with going around and correcting inventory issues. So when you sit there and you tell me that you have a world-class hours, picks per hour, I'm wondering where those hours went. For every 2 pickers, they had an inventory person who had to go and continue to adjust the inventory, move the inventory. Then they had expediters who would run back and down between the shipping line when someone had a mispick. They had to create a screen, ship cartons with picks missing. So instead of using the functionality, you had a WMS. The best thing about WMSs is to control your inventory, right? And then through controlling your inventory, you can build efficiencies and you can optimize your operations. But they weren't using that tool. They were using just enough of it to support what they wanted to do anyways. And to me, that is a complete mismatch of the technology you're putting in along with what you're trying to achieve. Falling in love with a bad situation, back to the love thing. We started off talking about love. We're back with love. It's always a nice tone to set, I think. This story is about a manufacturing company. I'm pretty sure they were up in the Northeast. They were a French-owned company. That's neither here nor there, just a little bit of color to be added. They had a manufacturing and distribution facility combined. And if you ever worked in that environment, sometimes it's a really good idea to split those off. Sometimes parts can bleed back and forth, and some bad behaviors can be created by having that proximity. Well, their chief engineer was a very vocal, very aggressive guy, and he decided that they needed to have a tunnel between the 2 buildings because they were out in the Northeast, and you didn't want people driving out there in the cold weather, and you didn't want material handling equipment being out in the parking lot. All makes sense, very logical. And he thought that a conveyor, which is, again, not sexy technology, it's not new, would be the best way to move product between the buildings. Okay. What he didn't do is look at how they were doing it today. They put the tunnel up, they put the conveyor in, and everything stopped, everything crawled. They just couldn't move. Well, the workers determined that they could move 5 times faster through the tunnel on a pallet stacked up with the product on a forklift. So that aggravated the chief engineer, because how dare these workers come up with a better solution than he was able to devise. But eventually they had to acquiesce that there really was a better way to do this, and it was the low-tech version instead of the high-tech version. It wasn't a systems issue. It's nothing we could do to make that go faster. The fastest way was to load up the pallet, drive it back and forth in a safe manner. And to me, the keynote in that short story is make sure as you embark on these journeys that you're involving the frontline workers, the people on the floor, in the decision. You get a couple things, benefits from that. One, if you're bringing technology in, the natural human emotion is they're coming for my job. They're trying to get rid of us all. You got to negate that. One of the ways you can negate that is to get the folks involved, understand you're trying to be more competitive. I read a couple weeks ago that companies that were early adopters, warehousing companies, and manufacturing too, into technology, while they had an initial reduction in labor, they became more competitive. They became a better supplier, they became more cost competitive, and they actually ended up growing their workforces, which is very counterintuitive, right? But because they were able to intelligently apply automation, they were able to be more competitive and actually increase the number of people they employed, as opposed to having these drastic labor reductions. And the other piece is the process. As you're going through how you're going to do that and you're evaluating your process documents, you need to make sure that they really reflect the way people are doing things today. I'm sure you've all gone out there and looked at a process document and then looked at how they're doing it, and they're completely unaligned. And I know in my own experience, one of the most frustrating things for my team, my leaders, was, you know, we go train these people. We had a little university, we called it, and they would go in the university and they'd get their training, and they'd go out on the floor, and we're all happy, and we knew they were going to kill it, until somebody tapped them on the shoulder and said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, they showed me how to do it this way." And he said, "It's not how we do it. This is how we do that." And that's human nature, right? You want to fit in with these people. You're going to do what the people you're working with tell you to do. You're going to fit into that culture. Well, as you embark on a transformation into technology, you really need to understand how we're getting that work done today. And if you're building a process to match, or technology to match a process that you don't really have, you're going to have a pretty big gap. So you got to really be careful with that one. And there's those robots. So this is a couple different 3PLs, and it's not necessarily a story of something that didn't work, but it's more, how could we have made this work better? So it was 2 different 3PLs, and they had a objective of getting their new labor onboarded quicker and getting their new labor more efficient in a more timely manner. And their thought was, and I think it's a great thought, if you can take the repetitive work away from the people and assign it to machines, you can get a better culture, you can get a better movement. Also, you could train the robots on material flow and how product moved through the building a lot quicker than you can train a new hire. Now, you can train the new hire how to use the RF gun, how to drive the forklift. They should be pretty effective quickly at that. But when you're looking at the flow of work through the warehouse and moving product here and there, the robots are really a better solution. So the company went out and they invested in the robots. They got the robots exactly what the provider, they arranged with the provider, they told them what they needed. But then when they went into scale, it didn't work. They had robots that couldn't hit the right reach height to be effective. They had robots that couldn't fit down certain aisles. As they changed, they found out they didn't have the right connections between their system and the robots, so they had to bring another company in to build connectivity so the system could drive the activity of the robots. And while all this is happening, ROI is being missed, service is in jeopardy, costs are likely going up, and all that, I would say, points to who was their partner. Did they do this themselves? And I don't know this. Did they do this themselves? Did they just give their provider a very specific window instead of looking at my whole process and how do I scale this and how do I grow this in the future? Did they have a system? I assume they didn't have a systems integrator because that tends to be what they do, is take that bigger picture view and build a roadmap. That would be my assumption. But the bottom line is, as with all these stories, a little bit more work on the front end can save a lot of pain on the back end. I'm sure another story, there's a local warehouse here. It's a very good company, but great companies make mistakes. They have about a 300,000 square foot warehouse, and they had some extra capacity. So they decided to move a operation from Mexico into the States. Doesn't happen often, happened that time. And it's kind of a light assembly operation. They make little components, don't want to go into it. And cost out time came, right? So if you've all worked every year, you have to have your cost out. How are we going to drive costs down? How do we drive costs down? Well, they looked at the building. They said, well, we got a PIC mod, we got RF technology, we got a tier 1 WMS, we have sortation systems. Why don't we take advantage of that with this new product? Again, at the highest level, without getting deep and down into the weeds, it makes perfect sense, right? You have all this infrastructure already. You have all these manual processes. We'll just shove them in there. Well, commitments were made, headcounts were committed to, reductions, people's names were written down if these people are going. I mean, it was a very serious effort to get these people out of the building. The inventory was moved over a weekend, very painful process to move the inventory. Came in to a new startup on Monday and they couldn't ship anything. Somehow they missed that all those components, 80% of those components, had a value added touch. They had to do something else to them before we could put them in the box and ship them. That's a big miss. So all those units went from the high velocity area. They didn't go to the dock door to be shipped. They went down to the value added service area where they already couldn't get the product out fast enough that they had from the legacy business. Did they spend time on the floor with the folks? Did they understand what they were doing? Did they look at what they were tasked with? Or did they just drive to pull cost out, come up with what they thought was a very simple solution, a very simple way to do that, and ended up with a big miss? So after a couple months of struggling, after some heated conversations with customers about our inability to support their business anymore, all that was moved back. Not only did the people that were let go have to be replaced, they had to be replaced with unskilled people, so more people had to be added. Costs went up, service went down, and all because a little miss was not understanding the process and not understanding the reality of what we were doing. Yeah, so I kind of like visuals, so a different way to look at this, it's like a puzzle. We have processes, we have systems, we have technology, and when they all fit, when we take the time to make sure they all fit together, we're going to have a very nice picture. We can, a little bit of work to do yet, but overall it looks like we're on the right track. It looks like we're going to end up in a nice spot. But when we force the pieces in, when we don't do the work to make sure that the pieces all fall in together in a logical way that's going to get us to a better spot than we're in today, it's going to meet our goals, we end up with something that looks a little bit like that, which looks a little bit like that square peg of the round hole we looked at the beginning. It's just not right. another image, and I'm going to leave you with this image, and I think it's going to be very difficult to unsee. Failing to take advantage to support the addition of state-of-the-art technology to your operation with a holistic view of your processes and material flow, it's kind of like painting lipstick on a pig. Isn't she a beauty? She got pearls on and everything. That is quite a picture. But in a way, I mean, it's you have a bad process, you try to cover it up with technology, with a system, with some robots, and if you don't start at the start, understanding your process, what are your goals of the technology? Are you trying to shorten your training? Do you have staffing issues that you just can't address any other way? Do you have quality issues that you think technology can enable? Whatever that goal is, how are you trying to do it today, and how does that technology fit with the process that you're either developing or want to augment? So before we take questions, just a little bit about me. My name is Dave Haley. My title actually changed. I am Senior Supply Chain Advisor with Open Sky Group. Open Sky Group does been a systems integrator, very much aligned with Blue Yonder. We've launched an advisory services offering to kind of help people through these things. We don't have a dog in the fight. We just want to help people be successful. I personally have over 30 years, and it's actually much more than 30 years, but I'll only admit to 30 years of supply chain experience. Started manufacturing, been very fortunate. I worked across numerous verticals, different models, 3PLs, outsourced operations, combined operations, worked in basic apparel, goods on hangers, electronics, computers, security equipment, service parts, logistics. So I've seen a lot, and it kind of helps me to be creative when I have to tackle things. Originally from Chicago, I'm still cursed with following Chicago sports teams rather, but I'm very familiar with the 3-year rebuilding project, and it kind of helps in business as you go forward because you're always doing some kind of rebuilding project. Living here in the Atlanta for the last 15 years and enjoy it very much. So I hope you got something out of that today. We're in booth 75, C75. If anyone wants to come by and chat later, we'll be here all week. We'll have somebody staffed the entire time. And any questions or comments or add-ons to what I covered today? It's usually not good when nobody has anything to say. All right, folks, that's my story for today. I hope you got a little bit out of that, and I enjoyed it and would be more than happy to have further conversations. Thank you.